The old woman's hands trembled as she placed the wilted daisies on the grave. The petals were thin, almost translucent, like her hope, like her strength. It was the 5th morning that week she had walked the 2 miles from her worn-down apartment to the cemetery, holding those flowers as if they were gold. She always came at sunrise, when the mist hung low and the world felt quiet enough for prayers to reach heaven. "Good morning, my darling," she whispered, brushing her hand over the cold stone. "I couldn't afford roses today, but these are from the park. You used to love daisies." She knelt there in silence, her thin figure framed by the growing light, the sound of birds waking up around her. Every day she did this, cleaning the stone, pulling weeds, speaking to a name carved in marble that no one else seemed to visit. But that morning, something was different. She felt a presence behind her. She turned and saw a man standing several feet away, tall, sharply dressed, the kind of man who looked like he belonged in a glossy magazine, not among the graves. He was staring at her. "Excuse me," he said gently, his voice low but careful. "May I ask what you're doing?" The woman straightened, brushing the dirt from her knees. "I'm visiting," she said simply. "I come here every morning." The man's gaze shifted to the gravestone. His eyes flickered in surprise. "You're visiting this grave?" he asked, as if uncertain. "Yes." She smiled sadly. "She was kind to me. I didn't know her well, but I owe her everything." The man's brows furrowed. "You knew her?" The woman nodded slowly, her wrinkled face softening with memory. "Her name was Emma," she said, touching the engraved letters tenderly. "She used to come to the soup kitchen where I volunteer. Always brought blankets and fresh bread. Never looked down on us, never asked for thanks. One winter, when my husband died and I couldn't pay rent, she found out and she paid it for 3 months. Said she couldn't bear to see someone alone suffer." The man's expression changed, his breath seemed to catch. "I wanted to repay her," the woman continued, her voice trembling. "But she passed away before I could. So I come here instead. I bring her flowers. It's all I can do." The man said nothing. He just stood there, the world suddenly very still around them. "Finally," he whispered, "that's my wife's grave too." The woman froze. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. He stepped closer. "Emma. Emma Carter. That's my wife." The woman's eyes widened, then filled with tears. She covered her mouth with her trembling hand. "Oh, dear Lord. I didn't know. I didn't mean to." "No," he said quickly, raising a hand. "Please. Don't apologize." He looked down at the grave, his expression unreadable. "I haven't been here in a long time," he admitted. "I couldn't. It was too hard." The woman could feel the weight in his words. She nodded silently. They stood there for a moment, side by side, 2 strangers bound by the same loss. After a while, the man asked quietly, "What's your name?" "Margaret," she said. "But most people just call me Maggie." He nodded. "I'm Daniel." The name sounded familiar to her. She frowned. "Wait. Daniel Carter? The one who owns—" "Yes," he interrupted softly. "Carter Industries." Her eyes widened again. She had read about him in the newspapers, the billionaire CEO, the man who built an empire out of nothing. "Ruthless," they said. "Brilliant. Untouchable." And yet, there he stood, with tears glimmering in his eyes. "I had no idea," she whispered. He let out a faint, bitter laugh. "Most people don't think a man like me can feel pain. But Emma, she was the only part of me that was real. Since he's been gone, I've just been pretending." Margaret looked at him with quiet empathy. "Sometimes the richest hearts carry the deepest emptiness," she said softly. He smiled faintly at that, his gaze fixed on the daisies. "You said she helped you?" "She helped everyone," Margaret said. She gave without asking. "You know, even after she passed, people still come to the soup kitchen and talk about her. She made us feel human when the world forgot we existed." Daniel's throat tightened. "She never told me about that," he said. "I was always busy." Todo focused on work. He thought providing her a good laugh was enough. Margaret didn't reply. There was nothing to say that could soften regret. After a long silence, Daniel knelt beside the grave for the first time in months. His expensive suit brushed against the dirt as he placed his hand over Emma's name. "I miss you," he whispered. Margaret turned away, giving him the dignity of his grief. The morning wind carried the faint scent of flowers between them. When Daniel finally stood, he looked at the daisies again. "You bring flowers every day?" "Yes," she said. "I picked them from the park. It's all I can afford." He hesitated, then said, "You shouldn't have to." "I can." No, her tone was gentle but firm. "Please, let me. It's my way of saying thank you. Money isn't the only way to honor someone, Mr. Carter." He looked at her for a long time, then nodded slowly. "You're right." That day, when Margaret left, she didn't expect to see him again. People like him lived in another world, high above hers. But the next morning, as she approached the cemetery, she noticed something strange. The grave was covered in roses. Dozens of them. Red, white, pink, frizz, vibrant, beautiful. And there, beside the flowers, was a note. For the woman who gave when she had nothing, and the woman who gave when she had everything. Daniel. Margaret felt tears spill down her cheeks. She sat by the grave and whispered, "You see, Emma? You're still changing hearts." Days passed, and Daniel began showing up more often. At first, just once a week. Then twice. Then every morning, just like Margaret. They would talk, quietly, gently, about life, about Emma, about loss. Daniel would bring fresh flowers, and Margaret would bring stories. One morning, as they walked away from the grave together, Daniel asked, "Do you still volunteer at the soup kitchen?" "Every evening," she said. "They need someone to keep the place open." He looked thoughtful. "Could I come?" She blinked. "You? There. Why not?" he said with a small smile. Emma Gouldsby wanted that. And he did. The first night he came, everyone stared. The CEO of Carter Industries, wearing rolled-up sleeves and serving soup beside an old widow. But Daniel didn't seem to care. He served quietly, humbly, listening to every story that came his way. Weeks passed, and something in him began to change. The lines of exhaustion on his face softened. He started to laugh again. Margaret noticed it, though. "You're healing," she told him one evening. He smiled faintly. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm finally becoming the man Emma thought I was." Then, one winter evening, Margaret didn't show up at the soup kitchen. Daniel waited. The next day, nothing. And the next. Worried, he went to her small apartment on the edge of town. The landlord told him she'd fallen ill. When Daniel walked into her room, he found her lying in bed, pale but smiling. "I told you not to worry," she said softly. "It's just the years catching up to me." He sat beside her, taking her frail hand in his. "You sold be told me. I could be gotten you the best doctors." "Daniel," she interrupted gently. "You already did enough. You gave me friendship. You made me feel seen." He lowered his head, his eyes burning. "You gave me life again, Margaret." She chuckled weakly. "Then I guess we saved each other." After that, Daniel arranged for her to have proper care, but her health continued to fade. Every day he visited, bringing fresh daisies, the same ones she had once left for Emma. One evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, she whispered, "Promise me something." "Anything." "Keep bringing her flowers," she said. "Even when I'm gone. But don't do it out of guilt. Do it because love never really ends." He squeezed her hand. "I promise." She smiled peacefully. "Good. Then I can rest easy." She passed away that night, quietly, the way she lived, without fuss, without noise, surrounded by love she never asked for. At her funeral, Daniel stood alone among the few who came. He placed a bouquet of daisies on her coffin and whispered, "You deserve roses." When spring returned, Daniel went back to the cemetery, two graves now stood side by side. Emma's and Margaret's. He brought daisies and roses for both. As he knelt between them, he realized something. The richest man in the city and the poorest woman in town had both taught him the same thing: love measured not in money, but in what we give of ourselves. From that day on, he founded the Emma and Margaret Foundation, a charity that built shelters, soup kitchens, and education centers for women in need. Every building carried a small inscription at the entrance. For those who give, even when they have nothing. Years later, on any morning, you could still find him at the cemetery. The old man, silver-haired now, still kneeling with fresh flowers in his hands. Sometimes, children from the shelter would come with him, helping him place the daisies and roses together. And when people asked why he did it, he would smile and say, "Because love doesn't end with death. It begins with kindness." Moral. Even the smallest act of kindness can ripple across lives in ways we may never see. Love isn't measured by wealth, status, or power, but by the quiet choices we make to care for another soul.